Hi, everyone. Today we're going to continue with a Romaniacs rum from the past. This one is actually made in Italy in the 1970s, and it's called the Jamaica Antoniazzi rum made by the Antoniazzi brothers. The company itself is like a really peculiar one. Initially, I was able to trace them back to the 1950s in this little town of Conegliano in the county of Treviso. But then I was able to take it back to 1926 because they were grappa importers and distributors. And then I found a letterhead that actually put the founding of the company at 1881. So that's about as far as back as I was able to trace it. Of course, like many such small companies throughout Europe in those years, they were just wine and spirits merchants. They specialized in grappas and brandies and probably everything else in between. But if you would recall, in the post-war years, there was a movement to make indigenous spirits a little bit more because they of all the privations on all the products that they had over there at the time. So rum fantasias was a thing in Italy around that time. And these were beet alcohol spirits or molasses spirits. It's really hard to tell. Let's assume for the second that it's just neutral alcohol from whatever source. And then they would put some Jamaican in there or something with a little bit of flavor kick. And then they would add, in some cases, like especially over in Eastern Europe, like in Croatia and Montenegro, the Balkans and so on, they would basically create a brandy of their own by just juicing this thing up with various macerations and spices and sugars and whatnot. And that continues to this day. Except now, of course, they can't be called rums, even if it comes from molasses, because the sugar level is just over 20 grams per liter or whatever. Now, this one I couldn't tell you what was in it, whether or where it actually came from. It says Jamaica, but beyond that, I know sweet fuck all. However, my understanding is that given this was made in the 1970s when things were already starting to settle down and, the economies of Europe had recovered and began to start making real stuff instead of this ersatz nonsense from the 1950s, which they used to call fantasias. But by then, a lot of the companies had consolidated. Many of them had gone out of business. You wouldn't recognize any of the names if you could. I mean, there was the, Gambaretta, there was Barbieri, there was Pagliari, there was Ticini. I mean, like, who are these people? Right? They've long gone out of business. And Antoniazzi has also, so far as I was able to establish, somewhere around the 1980s, they just went belly up or they sold out their stock to somebody else and they're gone. So this rum, which I have a photo of and I have a fairly generous sample from the Romaniacs from way back when. So what can I tell you about it? Well, for one thing, it has a really light floral scent, which I really quite liked. There is a lot of pears, there is watermelon and flowers, and then you've got that slight little funky note to it that almost kind of suggests a Jamaican without actually ever stepping over the line. And in that sense, it's actually closer to the Appleton profile than something a bit more feral that we are used to now from the new distilleries and the new Jamaicans. But it also has an amalgam of unsweetened yogurt, almonds, vanilla essence, white chocolate. It doesn't feel spiced, and I don't think it is. It certainly does taste nice, though, which suggests again that there's a Jamaican component in there, largely because the Hyesta stuff used to be part and parcel of what they used to do back then. And when you taste it, it's a little bit thin. It's 42% if I hadn't mentioned it before. It's a little bit thin, but many of the same notes go there. So you get some orange rind, for example, a lemon cheesecake or meringue pie. There's again the florals, the herbals, something of a little bit of strawberries and bubblegum. There is a little bit of caramel and deeper salty notes to it, and almonds and a bit of crushed nuts. But beyond that, I'm reaching if I was to tell you anything else. The important thing to understand, though, is that even though it was made as far back as the 1970s, so that's half a century ago, it's not a bad rum in and of itself. And it's not because they have this tradition of the rum fantasias and the spices and the additions or whatever that Eastern European rums should absolutely be tossed out with the trash and just forgotten about. I think there is some value to paying attention to them because even if they just diluted neutral alcohol with something else, it says something about the way the rums tasted back then and what people were drinking. And that by itself is actually quite important. Over and beyond that, I've really got very little to say about it. The new Jamaicans were far in the future when this was made. And of course, this was about the best that the Europeans, and especially in the South, were going to get at that point in time. the explosion of the independent bottlers and the distributors that presaged Velier and Fabio Rossi and Rum Nation and the rest of them was a bit in the future, but not that far ahead. So, it's a good way to look at the past. And beyond that, I've got nothing. That's about it for today, then. I'm going to post this as fast as I can, and I'll do some more later because I do have some others that I want to talk about. But for the moment, take care, everybody, and goodbye.